Okay, this is now live, or at least it's trying to be. So watch your P's and Q's.
All right, so now that it's live, go ahead and go get the it should have
embed.
Yep, it should have opened it in another window.
Yep. And
Perfect.
I know I have to mute that, but I gotta mute it. I can pause that, right?
What?
The actual like YouTube video.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. Share, embed. Grab that. And let's make sure I have the rights to do this. Content. Embedded content.
Are you on the Sakai page yet?
Yes, it should have just popped in there.
Very good. Okay, one thing that you did with it, there's nothing wrong with the way you did it, but go ahead and hit that plus sign on the in Sakai.
Okay.
And hit the add text button.
Okay.
Now hit the source.
Yeah. Okay.
Hit the source code button. Now there's only one real reason for this. I'll tell you in a second. Go ahead and paste your code right into there, into the source.
And hit save.
And hit save. Okay, beautiful. Now go ahead and delete out that first one.
Is the first one on the top, the first one on the bottom? Because they look the same to me.
Here, you don't worry about it. I'll do it.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Now the only reason for this, doing the source, number one, I like to center my videos. And number two, you'll notice if you refresh your screen here in a second. Go ahead and refresh your screen.
Okay.
So we can write inside of the same box. So if we need to add any notes in there or anything, we should be good.
Okay.
Otherwise, I'm going to mute my microphone so that.
Yep. I will probably start the local recording at. I mean, do you want me to wait until 3:15? Let me go ahead and start it now. Does it really make a functional difference?
Hey, this video is unavailable. Playback on other websites has been disabled by the video owner.
What the? That's not good.
So is that on your settings?
I don't think so, but I'm not entirely sure here.
Did you set it to public unlisted?
I'm checking. I know I set it to unlisted, but I'm seeing if it's public or not. Oh man, where is this? What's that? Let's see. Options.
So the stream itself, James, is working just fine.
Okay.
when you follow the link through, but it won't let us embed.
Okay. Well, my choices are private, unlisted, or public. Just make it public then.
Yeah, see if changing it helps.
Okay. All right, that should be.
Still not taking it. Give me a second. That's why we have backup plans.
Yay.
Give me a second. That's why we have backup plans.
I could hear something come through there, Tim.
Yeah, it's working.
All good now then?
Yeah, I think so. Well, why don't you go ahead and follow that link and make sure it works for you.
Okay. I can get to it through an incognito Firefox without signing in, so I believe it's public, yeah.
Perfect.
CQ. Yeah, that looks correct. All right, I'm going to start the. Do you want to go to the cloud or do you want me to do local here?
For recording, let's wait for Matt. Matt can start the recording and make the announcement and everything. Hey everybody, welcome to the technical setup show. If you got here a little bit early, and we only had one bump, so we actually did pretty well. Also, Emma, I see you there. We're going to have a meeting pretty soon. Barb's emailing you back, I think, as we speak. So
incredible. Looking forward to it.
yeah.
I think I might have cut out right as you said that. Looking forward to it.
Nope, I heard you. That was perfect. Thank you.
Hey, James. Hello, everybody else. James and I have to try to get the live stream set up.
Hey, don't worry about it, Matt.
I believe we have that running as of right now. I think
Oh, great.
everything's okay. Yeah.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Yep, James and I have everything set up for you, Matt. The only thing you'll need to do is I'd probably wait till more people are in here and then start your recording. And
Okay.
you can record to the cloud. We'll be perfectly fine. And just you'll want to make your announcement and probably throw it in the chat too. Hey, we're recording.
All righty. Thank you, guys. Hello, Marty Morris. You're muted.
Hi, how are you?
Good. When do you assume your chair duties?
A month, middle of August.
Have fun.
Yeah, right.
So the meeting is actually scheduled to start at 3:15 because of orientation and registration sessions today. So we're gonna wait till 3:15 instead of starting at the traditional 3:10 time. I guess you guys all must be quite dedicated to log in 15 minutes early. I want to remind folks that because of registration and orientation today, we're not actually starting till 3:15 instead of the traditional 3:10 time. So I will turn the recording on shortly here for folks that can't, that are interested and can't log in today. But we're going to wait till closer to 3:15 to officially start. And I think since most of the people doing the reports aren't here anyway, we have to wait for them. Nope, there's Professor Standiford is in now. I don't know if Walter is in.
There we go. So Walter should be here in just a second. So it's
Yeah, thank you, President Standiford.
I haven't been called professor in a while though, Matt. I kind of, that was I'll consider that a high form of compliment. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you.
Obviously I don't play that role anymore, but yeah.
I think I meant to say President Standiford, so I'm sorry for.
No, it was good. And
it was a slip of the tongue.
and one that I again, not offended at all. So it's and you can also call me Steve, although I know that's not necessarily comfortable for everybody, but. So my understanding was the meeting starts at 3:10. Is that right? Did I get that right? Or
we're starting 5 minutes late today because of orientation.
Oh, right. Okay. I knew there was a reason for the delay.
The traditional time is 3:10.
Okay.
And that's a historic artifact from an ancient schedule.
Ah, classes that ran up to the hour then, I assume,
Yeah.
right? Okay.
And of course, we wouldn't want to change such things after 30 years or whatever.
Right.
Even though we haven't run classes that's until 3 for 30 years. So I don't know.
I know Jeff Blade
Walter
plans to
is
join us as
here.
well.
I see. And
Let's see if Jeff has made it yet.
is Jeff Blade here yet?
I don't see him yet.
Okay, I'm going to, again, for those of you that are just getting here, we're waiting till 3:15 to start because of freshman orientation and registration today. It goes till 3:15, so wanted to give folks that were helping with that a chance to join us from the very beginning of the meeting. I am going to turn on the recording if I can figure this out. And our tech folks said record to the cloud.
Oh, I see Jeff's on as well.
Okay, thank you. So we'll give people a couple more minutes to get here. It's about time for my dogs to get fed, so they may get impatient and bark in the background.
I hear registration and orientation continues to go well, which is a good sign.
Classes are getting very full, I think.
Yeah.
That's great.
again, folks that are just logging in, we're waiting to start at 3:15 to give people from orientation registration time to get here. Or I guess time to change the Zoom session they're logged into.
One of the advantages, disadvantages of the online format is you can go from one meeting to the next with no break.
Yes.
Which,
So I've learned to not schedule them exactly back to back.
I need to get better at that. That's not, yeah, it's not always worked perfectly, but.
I think if somebody wants to do a countdown, 10, 9, 8, we're getting close here.
Yeah.
We've got 85 participants so far.
Okay.
So I think some of those are non-senators. I had several people ask for the Zoom link.
Sure.
And since we had the space, I gave it to them.
Great.
Okay, it is time to start. I will call the meeting to order. I have just a couple of announcements here. First off, I want to say thanks to James Salzman and Tim Wheat for all their help with the tech issues. It's because of them, first off, that I have a Zoom Pro license, but then it's also because of them that I know how to use it. And they were the ones that helped us set up the live stream. So we owe them particular thanks so that the entire university community can watch the meeting today. Also wanted to send out thanks to basically all of the committees that are working this summer.
Yeah.
We're in an unprecedented sort of situation, and it's really impressive how much the university community is stepping up and trying to help address all the issues that we're facing. So I want to say thanks to everybody. And again, there's too many committees to mention all the committees by name, so I'm not even going to attempt to do that, but thanks to all the work all of you are doing. And that goes to committees that are working on startup for the fall, but then again, committees that are also trying to address longer range issues. I also want to announce that there will be a University Senate meeting at 3:10, the traditional time on Thursday, August 20th. That's the Thursday after our official report date for the faculty. At present, the agenda for that meeting, there will be business items at that meeting. The agenda for that meeting at present has to do with several curriculum and regulations issues. Some of which are cleanup from last year's, but some of which are things that we would like to introduce to help as quickly as possible to help address revenue issues. The last thing I'm going to say before I turn this over to the people giving the reports today is to remind those people who are reporting to try to keep formal remarks as brief as possible and yet hit all your high points.
Perfect.
In particular, I want to do that to make sure we give all four presenters a chance to speak. I also would like to have a fair amount of time for senators to ask questions. With regard to questions, those of you that are in the room, in the Zoom, of course, can ask questions vocally. You could also post them on the group chat. I will try to monitor the group chat. If people notice a particularly interesting question on the group chat that I don't bring up or that doesn't get addressed just sort of incidentally by remarks by one of the presenters, please speak up. And then a fourth way, I guess third way to get questions before us, those people who are watching the live stream that aren't in the Zoom room can email me or your senator if your senator is present here. So I will try to monitor both the chat and my email and see if I can do this and keep track of what's going on in the meeting. If a speaker segment seems to be running on too long, I may get out the crook and remind them that it's time to move on to the next speaker.
Okay.
And with that, I will turn it over to President Standiford.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And I'll try to be disciplined and not to go too long. And the way I intended to structure this is my comments, if this works okay in the agenda, will lead right into Jeff, right into Walter, and we'll kind of seamlessly go through our presentations together, if that makes sense. But before I even get into my comments, I want to start where Matt started and just thank everybody for, first of all, being here today. This is obviously probably not normal to be holding a Senate meeting in the summer, and I appreciate everybody stepping forward to be a part of this conversation. And a huge shout out just to everybody for the extraordinary work that is happening this summer. This is a summer like none other. And I think I was talking to Aaron earlier, and we've both gotten questions from our kids of, how did you handle this when you were a kid? And we're like, well, none of us have ever been through anything like this before. This is a wholly unique experience, and just appreciate all the extra work that I know is going on right now to keep things working in a positive direction. So I really had two big things I wanted to talk about in my remarks. And Matt, again, thank you for the introduction and the idea to keep it short. But even as I say keep it short, feel free to intervene if there are questions as I go into some of these items, and we can talk about them in a bit more detail. But the two items that I really wanted to talk on are the recent reductions. I know there's some questions and perhaps some conversation we can have around what we've done in terms of the personnel reductions. And then obviously the other big issue is our back to campus plans. And I thought I would give you just a brief overview first around the reductions and what we're doing in that space and kind of what we've been able to accomplish. And then do a nice conversation around that, answer any questions that people may have, and then we can move into the back to campus conversation. On the reduction front, and I know some of you through executive council, through advisory groups and such have heard some of this before. So for those that have heard much of this before, my apologies for the repetitiveness, but I want to make sure we're all kind of operating on the same page. On the reduction front, there's really been two big issues we've been tackling. Maybe I should probably call it the financial front, because that's probably more accurate. And the two issues that have been really dominant conversations for the summer, Jeff Blade and I, who started together, I think we realized we've been here 10 weeks now, I think. So we're now in week 10. And it's been busy. And on the financial front, there were really two big issues that needed attention right away. Obviously, one of the big issues was the immediate challenges associated with the pandemic that we're currently experiencing. Again, a situation like none other. And one of the things we needed to do is do some quick work to get understanding of and some activities around managing the challenges associated with the pandemic. The other issue, though, that ended up being fairly important and was something we felt like we needed to get on right away was working towards a balanced budget for the university. And so when we've been talking about our financial challenges, there's really two issues we've been simultaneously trying to address. One is to deal with the current financial realities that have been brought forward because of COVID-19. And the other is to put the university in strong financial health moving forward. And I think that's a really important thing for us to focus on because it fundamentally changes the place when you find yourself on strong financial footing. And we're very committed to making that happen. So in a minute, I'm gonna turn it over to Jeff Blade, our CFO. And I think many of you have met Jeff, and if not, this will be a great opportunity for you to hear a little bit more from him. He's going to talk specifically about our financial position. I had a conversation with the group that's kind of working on getting the finances a little bit cleaner and understandable, and really excited about the work they've been able to do. What I want to do is I want to outline our overall approach that we've taken to trying to address some of the issues. And I'll begin by really giving a shout out. We put together an emergency planning advisory group. And I think for a while we were meeting with them on a weekly basis, and then we dialed that down back now to every other week. Also had some great conversations with the University Senate Ad Hoc Advisory Group, and those groups have given some really important feedback into the process. And the two things that really became immediately important and obvious is first, as we navigated into the challenges and trying to think about how we get ourselves financially moving in the right direction, it was really important to do that in a way that preserves the culture, that really make the tough choices that we have to make, but do it in a way, if we can, and we were able to, I think, mostly to find ways to do this in a way that preserve the culture as much as possible. And then the other issue was to be thoughtful because of the issue of both balancing the immediate, but then also the long term, identify ways to do permanent versus emergency one-time changes. We'll if and when we need to do so, we'll make some emergency changes to help us navigate our current environment. Fortunately, our enrollment numbers and some other things are looking perhaps better than we initially anticipated. So we've been able to do less of that. But a lot of it was around thinking about how do we make the type of reductions that put us on solid financial footing moving forward. And so that was a lot of our thinking as well. Again, a lot of things you already know, but I just want to kind of set the frame. And the first phase of that then was, of the reduction plan, was to do a voluntary severance first. And we had a lot of conversations in the senior leadership team around what that would look like and how we would structure it. Felt it was important that it be voluntary, do as much of that as possible before we look at anything involuntarily, and open it up as wide as possible as well, so that we could really have the type of impact we were hoping to have across the board. In a good way, I think, we actually had fairly strong participation in the voluntary severance incentive program. And because of that, I don't think I know, we were able to do less of the involuntary than I think we initially anticipated would be the case. So at least from a strategy perspective of trying to do the involuntaries first, that actually seemed to go well. And then the other thing, and I know I created some tension, and I get the feedback on this, by the way. I think in one of the forums, I said that our reduction plans would be guided by, but not bound by the handbook. And I got really strong feedback on that. So I appreciate that feedback. It was good. And I think in the end, we were able to, in fact, go at the reductions that we were then forced to do some additional reductions in a way that was more in line with at least the spirit, if not the letter of the handbook, and do it as non-reappointments, but then let people have this year to work through that process, so that even though we felt it was important to do some additional reductions, we're able to do it in a way that was perhaps more humane than what we initially thought might have to be the case. So that's kind of the framework of what we did. The other piece that has been interesting, and I'll say even challenging on this, is then talking about the specifics of what we've done in the positions. And I'll share with you that for me, there's been a real attention around two values I personally hold very important. If the three things I often talk about is transparency, accountability, and respectfulness. And one of the challenges in terms of, I've gotten a lot of requests around more information around the specifics of individuals who participated in the voluntary reductions and are now part of the non-renewal. And we have not identified those positions, and we have not been specific on the individuals that have been impacted. And again, it's this dual tension that I'm struggling with around wanting to be transparent, but then also wanting to respect the individuals that are being impacted. And I want to give everybody the opportunity to exit with integrity. And so we made the decision not to be transparent with the exact positions and the individuals that have left the organization. And for what it's worth, I actually had this conversation with the board of trustees as well. I've talked to our board chair. He was asking the same question, and the board is not getting that information either. We've decided to protect the integrity of the individuals and let them exit in terms that make sense for them. What we can share, and what I am comfortable having a conversation around, is that we will, every area of the university was impacted. And one of the things we're still sorting through some of these numbers, but so for example, one of the things that I've gotten a question about is, what about, and you could pick any area, right? But what about academic affairs versus the rest of the university? And what we're finding as we're running the numbers is that the spread across the areas has been almost identically representative of the number of people that are in those areas. So about 69% of the personnel positions are actually in academic affairs, and that's about the same percentage of the number of individuals that were engaged in some type of the reduction process. The other question I got, and I don't mind sharing this, I think, Matt, you mentioned that this had come up in a couple of different areas around, did it happen at all levels? And I'm very careful to not talk about who took the voluntary severance unless given permission to do so. I have been given permission to share that our Associate Vice President of Marketing is one of those positions. So Renee Richards has taken the voluntary severance. That's a senior management level position. And consistent with what we're doing in all areas, we are not replacing that position. We're looking at our marketing function and seeing if we can make adjustments to be able to do what we need to do with the staffing that we have. And we're not just shoving people back into positions that have been vacated. So everybody's taken a bit of a bite on this one. And that's something we're still working through. But all of this is designed to get us closer to a balanced budget. So a lot of those reductions, we're looking to treat those as permanent reductions. And that's been a real aggressive approach for us. Committed to getting us to a balanced budget. In fact, one of the things that we've gone on record of saying is we're going to get there. I want to get there soon. This is where we'd get more into financial stuff. So my temptation is to go ahead and kick it off to Jeff Blade to talk more about the financials. I'm wondering if I should pause and answer any questions before I do that, or should we just go straight in and have Jeff talk a little bit about the financials?
If people want to ask questions, be sure to state your name so that we know who we're talking to. Because of the Zoom layout, I can't see everybody who's speaking, and our secretary would like to also know the name of the person speaking so he can get it into the minutes. Does anyone have any questions for President Standiford?
And those questions can come back later too, by the way. I don't want to suggest that.
Steve, there's a couple in the chat.
Yeah.
People were curious how many people ended up actually taking the voluntary separation. And then you sort of answered the second one. What was the breakdown of faculty versus staff?
Yeah. It's interesting. So what I mentioned is academic affairs versus non-academic affairs. I don't know that that's a great question around faculty versus staff. I believe that balanced out pretty across the board as well. I don't have that number at hand. No reason we can't calculate that number and share it. I just don't have it with me, and I don't want to suggest that it is exactly consistent with the number of individuals because I don't have that data with me. But I suspect it is because that's kind of how the data played out as we looked across the board in general. Walter may have more specifics on that, and he's going to chime in here just a little bit on some stuff. But I can circle back with more information about that as well. Jeff, do you want to share some of the financials and that maybe answer some of the questions as well as we get into it? And again, no reason not to come back to some of these questions later, later in the conversation.
Right. Well, thanks, Steve, and good afternoon, everyone. Nice to be with all of you. So as Steve mentioned, we have been working diligently over the last 10 weeks to put together an operating budget for fiscal 21. So the way our fiscal year works, fiscal 20 ended at the end of May, and the new year began June 1. And so when we met with the Board of Trustees in May, one of the things that we told them was that we were in the midst of trying to assess and build a number of different scenarios to anticipate what might happen as a result of COVID-19, and also address some of the ongoing budget deficit issues. So that's what we have been working on. And as Steve mentioned, our goal was two things. One, minimize the effect of COVID-19 as much as possible and close as much or all of the budget gap for fiscal 21. What we've seen so far, so we're at a point where we actually met with Steve today, this afternoon, to present what we think is a near final budget. We're getting close. We have a few more tweaks, but a couple of things that have transpired since the beginning of May. One, enrollment is very strong, as I think you all are aware. So we are essentially flat to prior year numbers. So back in the March-April timeframe, when students were sent home for the balance of the semester, the conventional wisdom in higher education was that colleges and universities could see as much as a 25% hit for fall in terms of students not enrolling, new students not enrolling, and students not returning. And so at least one of our scenarios had that, and that was what Gary Roberts communicated at the end of April, was that if 25% of students didn't return, could have a budget deficit of up to $40 million. So that was sort of the starting case. If you took COVID-19 out, they had also done an early scenario that suggested that a normal operating budget deficit for fiscal 21 would be about $10 million. So that was sort of our starting point. What we have done over the last several months is we have worked diligently to get very granular, look at every line of the budget. We've been working closely with enrollment management to understand the enrollment trends. So the budget that we've put together right now anticipates cutting the annual budget deficit roughly in half. So we're anticipating, and again, we're not final yet, but we're anticipating a deficit for fiscal 21 in the $6+ million range, something in that zone, and we'll refine that a little bit more before we're done. We communicated that a few weeks ago. We had a mid-cycle review with the Board of Trustees, and we communicated to them that the good thing was that enrollments were strong, and so we're not anticipating anything like the original potential deficit of 40 million, and that we were anticipating something in the $5 to $7 million range, which would be closing roughly half the deficit. The reason that, and the way we got there obviously is what Steve mentioned, which was the voluntary incentive retirement incentive plan, which had good participation. We've also looked critically at every other line. The reason that we're not anticipating or not trying to close the entire budget deficit this year is that it would have required much more drastic actions that we think would be the wrong things to do for the long-term health of the organization and the culture at Bradley. So it would have required things like salary reductions, eliminating contributions to the 503B plan for a year. Some things that some other universities did choose to do, we chose not to, and we have the support of the Board of Trustees to close the gap over 2 years. We still have a lot of heavy lifting to do in order to do that, and the way we have laid out the plan to do it is closing roughly half for fiscal 21, continuing to look at operational efficiencies. So there was some work done by an external consulting group, Huron Consulting, in the spring that suggested a number of potential operational efficiencies, from centralizing and streamlining some of the administrative functions, making improvements in process and systems. And we will go forward with some of the recommendations and work that they laid out. So that will contribute to getting us eventually to a balanced budget. The other two important things are finding new program opportunities that are of potential benefit and opportunity to the university. And I think all of you are aware that we have an effort underway right now to identify and approve new programming that will drive alternative revenue for the university. And the third leg of it is in development. So traditionally, over the last several years, Bradley's development opportunities in terms of fundraising have been more modest. We think there's an opportunity with all of the great things going on in the university for that to accelerate. And we've been doing a comprehensive review with a philanthropic giving consulting firm that does a lot of work in higher education to help us think through how we can accelerate that. So with all of those efforts, we're anticipating being able to balance the budget within 2 years. And again, doing it in a way that preserves the long-term health and viability of Bradley.
Great. So that gets us to a good pause on questions that you all may have. I think Walter's going to come in and talk a little bit about the new program stuff. That ends up being, as Jeff mentioned, we talk about the three-legged stool of cost containment, advancement, new development opportunities, fundraising opportunities, and then new programs. And Walter was going to talk a little bit, but thought we'd ask questions before that.
I have a quick question from one of my colleagues. This is Bill Bailey in accounting. I was asked to ask what cash flow looks like for fiscal year 2021. I know in previous meetings we've talked about cash flow in addition to operating budgets. And so if you could speak to cash flow.
Yeah, so cash flow, when Steve and I joined back on May 1, there was some concern about cash flow, and it was driven by a couple of things. One, an anticipation that enrollment could be off by as much as 25%. And there was also a concern that the budget deficit for fiscal 20, the year we were just finishing, would be in the $10 to $15 million range. And so if those two factors, and then the third factor was in March when COVID-19 first hit in a significant way in the US, the markets dropped dramatically. So initially the value of our endowment dropped. So there was some concern that we might have a cash flow issue, and we might have covenant issues on our bonds that we'll use to finance some of the new buildings on campus. And for a university like Bradley, cash flow is an issue typically in the July, August timeframe. So you start ramping up spending before all of the tuition dollars start to flow in, and then in the December, January timeframe. What's happened since then is one, the enrollment has been strong, so we're anticipating strong cash flow from operations as it relates to tuition, because Bradley is like a lot of schools of our profile, is a tuition-dependent organization. And then second, Pratima Gandhi, the former CFO, and a number of individuals in administration and all of you throughout the university did a really outstanding job in the spring when students were not returning to really shut down all non-essential spending. And the savings from students not being on campus and the shutdown of non-essential spending, savings were greater than what was originally anticipated. So the combination of those two things, we're in a strong cash position. There will not be a cash crunch. And with the markets recovering, the value of the endowment is actually on a net basis up for the year. So we won't have any bond covenant issues either.
Thank you.
This is Teresa Drake. Question from the chat. When and with whom will a Huron report be shared?
So with regards to the Huron report, they made a series of recommendations that are mostly administrative in nature. So it was really around some of the administrative functions, things like IT, finance, HR, marketing. We're still in the process of finishing work on their original recommendations, because some of that work got truncated with COVID-19, because there was some additional work that they wanted to do some additional interviewing and some focus groups, and that got truncated as we were coming on and as COVID-19 was going on. So we're in the process of talking to them about finishing that work, as well as identifying potentially working with them to implement. And so as that work potentially continues, we're happy to share what we're doing in that work.
And Jeff, I may be off on this, but I thought I remembered, and this was before you and I even came on board, there was a presentation. I can't remember if it was to Senate Executive or Senate, but I thought there was a presentation about what they had shared with some group that I was a part of, and I can't remember, but it sounds like maybe not anything with the Senate.
Yeah, it wasn't shared with the Senate.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have a question. You talked about the this is Chris Malachero. Okay. What about you just talked about some of the potentially new program opportunities that the university was considering. What could they be, or what are they tentatively at least?
So Walter was going to talk a little bit about that in general. So I actually, that's a great question. And actually the other question in that is the process by which we would go through to come up with different ideas. Okay. And Walter, do you want to go ahead and start sharing a little bit, and I think that would answer some of your questions. And if not, we can come back and make sure we answer those. Does that make sense?
Okay. I also have one other question along with it in terms of, this came up earlier also, I think in the chat, in terms of what was, and a little bit more specific, what was the breakdown in terms of, how many faculty took the voluntary separation by college, or, some kind of a number like that, or faculty and staff by college?
So I have to go back and look at all the numbers. If I remember right, there were about 63 total VSI people that took the voluntary severance. And I believe the number of faculty was 17, if I remember right. So I have to go back. I'm doing this a little off of memory. And so I'm glad it's recording that I just mentioned that I'm not 100% certain about these numbers. So it's, but we can look that up and get that information back out. But I believe that was the number, that the ratio that ultimately came out of the voluntary severance. Now, we are being careful not to talk about it by area. I can tell you that every area was hit. But again, one of the challenges is how do you do it in a way that respects people's confidentiality? And that's not just me being paranoid on that. We had people explicitly say, I'm interested in doing this, but it's important to me that it be confidential that I'm doing it. And so that was part of the agreement with folks that had stepped forward, that we would keep it confidential. So happy to share some information. I just want to be careful not to be so refined that if you get too refined in the data, you'll be able to figure out exactly who it was. And that's one of the things we want to be careful about.
Okay, you want me to go now?
I think that'd be a good time to go. And then, and then Chris, again, if he doesn't completely answer your question, come back and we'll make sure we catch that. So it's,
I'm not sure if Chris Jones is on the call, and there may be questions that come up that he would be in a better position to answer than I'm able to, but let me go ahead. So as the president indicated, that an important aspect of our plans is to generate new programs in order to help generate new revenue for the institution. It's an important part of the strategy, and really lets us go from the survive and then thrive model, or to the survive and then thrive model that the president talks about. So Dean Chris Jones is on special assignment. He is reporting directly to President Staniford in this role. He's in that role for 3 or 4 months. He developed a checklist for new program consideration. And we're really looking at 3 issues as we look at whether or not we develop new programs in an area: strategic alignment, financial viability, and executability. Can we pull the program off? In order to make investments in programs, we would really need to be able to demonstrate and have evidence that we can we can be successful in all 3 areas. If it is degree related, then it'll come up through University Senate, but we're also trying to move fast, which is one of the reasons for the August meeting that we've asked to be scheduled. We want to honor the process, and so, for example, I would expect that we are going to try and schedule a curriculum meeting shortly before the Senate meeting in August. And so if you serve on the curriculum committee, you can anticipate an invitation to a meeting that would happen sometime shortly before that August Senate meeting. And as I said, we're likely to have programs coming through in August. I have some other things that I can talk about, but I think that's primarily in responses to questions, or I also think that the president is going to talk about some other areas where I might chip in as well. But that was primarily the area that I was reporting on today.
So Walter, one of the things that a great summary of what we're looking at in terms of the programs. One of the things that's been interesting is, and I think Chris Jones is on the call here, done a really nice job of putting together a framework. And he also chaired a new opportunities committee, which came up with some really good stuff. The ad hoc University Senate committee had some great ideas. So the ideas are coming from all different areas. So I think one of the questions is, where are these ideas coming from? They're coming from everywhere, and they can come from anywhere. And then there's a nice template that we've put together where you can quickly do an assessment of the programs. And I thought, again, to Chris Jones' credit, who was on the line earlier, I think he's still there. I think I still see him. Chris did a nice job of starting to frame that out for us. Chris, do you want to add anything on that? I think you're still muted, Chris.
It would really depend on the level of detail that you want to go in on. I mean, it might be helpful for colleagues to know that it's sort of a three-tiered structure where we're looking at some quick wins, and we have a very compelling degree program coming out of CFA under the quick win category. We have two other degree opportunities, one interdisciplinary innovation degree out of the Turner School, as well as a general studies degree proposal out of liberal arts and sciences that will help people complete degrees. One thing that colleagues should know, that over the course of about 10 years at Bradley, there were no less than 440 men and women who left here without a degree that were just a few credits short of completing. And in LAS, we've run some pilot programs where we've gone back and encountered trying to help those individuals, and they've been extremely grateful alumni. So I think this is a very untapped market. And if you look at other institutions, they're putting their wherewithal on completion degrees. So these will be, of good quality. I don't want anybody to think this is just sort of an easy way out of a Bradley degree, but I think it's a market that we have not been attuned to. And then there's another category, which we're calling kind of moving forward. And this is where I'm working very closely with the deans. So if you're a department chair or a colleague who has an idea, you should be going to your dean and working with him or her on ideas. And there's a proposal process that I provided the deans that they can vet your ideas and decide whether they should go forward. And these will be some online programs that might be Bradley grown, as opposed to working with third-party providers. These will be on-the-ground degree programs, certificate programs, and then we see some really compelling ideas in professional and continuing education that can be run out of continuing ed, as well as the Center for Professional Excellence, perhaps in the College of Business. And then lastly, one thing that I think Steve and I are really excited about is there's some transformative opportunities, some great ideas come out of the Senate Ad Hoc and the New Opportunities Committee and elsewhere on campus to really move Bradley forward in some compelling ways. So there's a concept paper being developed for a perspective, and these are just initial ideas. Doesn't mean they're going to be approved, but a Lydia Moss Bradley Center, a more integrated approach to global education, new ways to price tuition, thinking about differentiated tuition, looking at maybe different rates for summer, looking for maybe different rates for alumni, being very innovative and creative in that way as well. And then really taking a far more comprehensive and advantageous approach to our relationship with OSF. I think that's really the big partner in town. I think we can double down on healthcare, and there are many opportunities, and OSF is a willing partner. And we had a very exciting preliminary meeting this week about the potential for that relationship, maybe even a center for medical humanities, but also ways to increase the conversion rate for RNs that would work for OSF, opportunities to find more clinical possibilities for our students. So there's really a wide range, but I'd encourage you to think about it maybe as 3 tiers, some quick wins, then some moving forward aspects, which would be degree programs, and then some major structural changes that could advance the educational enterprise here at Bradley University. But we're starting off early, and these things need to be vetted. And I think what's important for people to know is that the president and the provost, the CFO, are reviewing these proposals and giving a thumbs up in a concurrent way. And I like that because I know how much time and effort it takes to enter things into the curriculum process. And I don't want things to go into the curriculum process and then people to be irritated by the fact that there aren't resources that are forthcoming. So I've stressed to them the importance of respecting CNR and shared governance, but we want that process to happen after we know we have the support of senior leadership for these initiatives. I don't know if Walter wants to speak more about that, but I think that's a very important development. And I think in the long run, it's going to be an important one for Bradley University.
This is Burl George from Civil Engineering Construction. I would like to know if we can get a breakdown of those individuals that did not complete their degree by college and by department. And secondly, when can we expect the Huron report? That's the Senate members.
Well, I can chime in a little bit. I don't know that we currently have a complete breakdown on the non-degree completion. Chris, do you have that? Have you seen that data?
I would have to ask Bill McDowell and Rob Prescott for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And boy, I'm hearing a lot of interest in the Huron report. I don't think there's anything confidential there. We could start sharing some of that stuff. I don't know that it's some of it. Even the Huron folks were very clear on the fact that their report was pre-COVID-19 and a lot changed even as they were finishing their report. But I don't see why we couldn't make that available to people if they're interested in seeing it. Really, probably the more important piece, if I'm blunt about it, isn't so much the report itself, but what are we moving forward with from the report? And that's something we're happy to share as well. I think that's probably the more relevant information. I'm trying to in real time read some of the chat while I'm listening intently to the conversation, which is always tricky. 2 things that came up that I just want to highlight on, and it's interesting. I have in front of me here, I won't go through it, but this is the white paper from the ad hoc committee. There's really some great stuff in here. It shows up here, so I'll show in some of the chat about the issue of financial transparency and moving towards something that would resemble a responsibility centered management, something a CRM. I'm getting all my terms messed up here, but a more accountable accounting system. I can tell you unequivocally, without question, that Jeff and I love that idea, and that's something we want to do. That's something we're moving towards. I'll be kind and say that our finances right now are messy, and that's probably an understatement. And Jeff and his team have worked really aggressively over the last couple of months trying to get that cleaned up. And one of the things we want to try to move towards quickly is to get that data cleaned up in a way that, first of all, we feel confident that the data is accurate, and then start sharing that on a much wider basis. I'm getting strong indications in really positive ways that people are excited about being partners in tackling some of these challenges, and you can't do that if you don't have good data. And that's something, and Jeff, feel free to chime in if I'm misstating anything here, but that's something we get pretty excited about trying to do quickly, and we're working towards that. So you on mic, Jeff, does that all sound about right?
Absolutely right.
Yeah. The other piece that came up, and boy, again, I'm glancing as these come up, and I'm not going to catch everything, and I apologize about that. But one of them that came up, and I can absolutely understand where the question's coming from, but I want to reframe it. And that is, are resources going to be reallocated for the new programs? And it's interesting because I can see why that would be a concern. And one of the things that I've seen and felt in my first 2 months here, still early in the process, still learning a lot, is we've operated a lot under a fixed pie mentality. And I really want to break away from that. And part of the advantage of getting some quick wins on some early programs that develop and start generating revenues doing some more aggressive work in advancement, is we shouldn't be having to take money away from other areas to invest in new areas. We should be looking for opportunities to grow the pie, whether that's through advancement opportunities. Remember the three-legged stool, some of those new programs, early new programs will bring in new revenues that will help us be able to handle some of the increased cost demands that might go with those programs as well. And we can do some creative things in advancement. If we have exciting things for people to get invested into from a fundraising perspective, we can raise more funds. So this is not this absolutely is not a zero-sum game. And in fact, if there's a new program that could only survive by cannibalizing something else, well, then that's not a viable new program. The idea is to invest in things that are going to help us grow the pie, not shrink it. Jeff, I saw you on mute there. Go ahead, please.
Steve, a couple of people have asked about whether there's any possibility of additional involuntary staff reductions this academic year.
So I will be intentionally clear and fuzzy on that at the same time. It is not our intent. That's a process we went through. We did that. Now, that assumes, of course, that everything holds the way it's holding now with the enrollment numbers. And this is such a dynamic environment right now that if everything were to suddenly turn upside down on us, that's obviously something we'd have to be thinking about. It is not our intent to go through that. We've done what we think we need to do in that space, and it is not our intent to continue down that path, given our current financial projections. Now, the one thing we will be looking at now, and I'm trying to be thoughtful on how I respond here. We'll be looking at a lot of different processes, and I think there's some efficiencies to be gained, but I'm hoping we can do that in an organic fashion is what we're looking to do as we start thinking through some of these other changes as well. Walter, Jeff, you all have been key parts of those conversations. Anything you want to add to the way I answered that question? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, great.
Hi, this is Danielle Glassmeyer. I'd like to ask a question that even in my head sounds kind of basic. But can you clarify the 12 people who from our Bradley family who we decided to cut? They were cut not because of the crisis of COVID, but because of a long-standing deficit. Is that correct?
Actually, a very insufficient but uncomfortable answer, but I'm going to say it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, there's a long-term issue, a sustainable issue that we've got to do as well. And we feel it very much this year because of some additional expenses this year as well. But that is a structural deficit issue, probably more than anything else, is to try to get the structural deficit under control.
A structural deficit would mean that it was something that was not precipitated by a crisis.
It was not precipitated by the current crisis, but it's been existing. There is a financial, I'm trying to think of the right words here. The financial strain was there before the COVID-19 crisis. So it was precipitated by a financial strain that pre-existed pre-COVID-19, but the strain was already there.
This is Christy McQuaid. I feel like this is a good time to ask this follow-up question. Follows from what Danielle asked. I mean, I think it's a source of frustration among faculty that we don't fully understand how the university got to a position of a $10 million structural deficit in the first place. That's not something that's really ever been discussed at any of these meetings anyway. And yet here we are in a position where we have lost some really valuable colleagues, leading to chaos in the weeks leading up to the beginning of the semester, increased workloads due to loss of expertise in our units, and increased teaching loads. Yeah. So I guess my question is, what's the plan for next year, right? In units where all the faculty are now on a 12-hour load instead of a 9-hour load, how will that be solved without going back to a situation where we're increasing expenditures?
You want me to talk about that, Steve?
You know, I was looking at your box, Walter. I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about that one. It's
so as we indicated, when we went down the path of suspending expenditures on part-time faculty, what we anticipate is that we will not do that again in the future. That is, I would expect for next year that we will return to hiring part-time faculty and return faculty loads back to what they have been. President Staniford and I have had a number of conversations about his support and belief and my support and belief in the teacher-scholar model that I think is really key to and a hallmark of what Bradley does. My hope is that we will quickly get back to being able to staff up in the appropriate areas where we have students enrolled and where we've got demand in those areas. It probably won't happen quite as fast as we would all like. And I think that one of the things that the president has said again and again is that we have to be very careful not to put ourselves in exactly the same position that where we were in the last year. So we've gone through this pain. We don't want to go back through the pain again. And so as we return to having part-time faculty, or if we as we consider staffing up, all of that is going to be very thoughtful. It's not just going to be a situation where we used to have this position, so we should have this position again. We're going to have to be able to demonstrate in every instance that we've got a real need for that.
You know, Walter, that was I think you summarized that nicely about how we want to think about it. And I'm thumbing through the report that the ad hoc committee put together, and I can't find what I was looking for immediately. But I think the ad hoc committee documented nicely. And the data's been messy. I don't know how else to describe it. It's been really messy, and huge compliments to Jeff and Dee and the finance and accounting team to try to get that cleaned up quickly. But the data that the ad hoc committee was able to put together showed that the deficit didn't just suddenly happen. It's been creeping up on us, and it's been developing over time and getting bigger. And that's been the challenge. And I think part of the challenge has been, if I'm blunt about it, we just weren't financially disciplined enough to be paying as much attention to that as we needed to. That'll change moving forward. That's something that we're going to be much more disciplined to pay attention to, so that we don't, Christy, to your point, so we don't just suddenly find ourselves in this position again. That's absolutely what we don't want to do. So we will have to be more disciplined moving forward to watch that. The other thing that I see and feel is there's a lot of inefficiencies in the processes, and you all feel that probably in the day-to-day. I can't remember being in an institution in the last decade where I've moved as much paper as I move here. We have so many processes that are paper-oriented, and I can imagine how many hours a day each of you spend dealing with some of these inefficient processes. And there are some significant savings to be found in some of those areas as well. So we'll just have to pay it, and it kind of snuck up on us, I think. And one of the things we want to do is be very disciplined and thoughtful about tackling some of those processes and being careful to keep an eye on the finances so they don't get out of hand again.
Matt, this is Jeannie Bukowski. Can I jump in here for just a moment? I just want to bring up two things from the chat that also are relevant regarding the ad hoc committee report and that financial information that the president is referring to. And I think these are both related. There's one question in the chat that says, that makes a handbook reference. The overriding consideration in preparing and recommending a plan for responding to a state of financial exigency, although we're not really using that word, shall be the preservation of Bradley University as a viable institution of higher learning without impairment of the academic standing of the university. Can you make an argument that terminating faculty will not impair the academic standing of the university? And then one of the committee members also brings up something that we think we showed pretty firmly in the ad hoc report, is that there, of course, are a variety of causes from what we have been able to glean, especially University Resources Committee, has been able to put together in terms of the causes of our structural deficit, the problems that we are in.
Yeah.
One of the points that we made is that it wasn't caused by instructional costs. So we have a real problem, and we have recommended against cuts to instructional costs. So I think there's a lot of, I guess, unease on the part of both the committee and faculty at large that that we're looking at cutting faculty when instructional costs really haven't been the problem behind the structural deficit, if this is a response to the structural deficit.
Yeah, and boy, this is messy data, and Jeff and Walter, feel free to chime in as I kind of talk through some of this. I don't think you can say any one area was or was not responsible for the structural deficit. I don't think our data is clean enough to tell us that. So I think that would be a and I know some of it is trying to sort through the data, and some of that's been messy and not clear, and I actually do think part of the lack of transparency has not been necessarily intentional. It's just been difficult given how the data is structured. But I would have to be cautious suggesting that one area was or was not responsible for the deficit. I think it was everywhere. The other thing that we found is, as we started looking through it, and to Jeff's credit, one of the first things he did is he sat down with every area VP and said, tell me everything about your area, your cost, your budgets. What we've also done is there have been a number of cuts in recent years, almost exclusively on the administrative side of the house. And I know it doesn't always seem or feel this way, but there are some areas there that have gotten very lean, like dangerously lean. And so there's just not a lot of places to reduce. And as a result, what we ended up doing was across the board. And quite frankly, less than we thought would be the case, partly because when we look at it on the instructional front, but also in other areas, there's not a lot of fat there to go after. And so there's just some things we need to do to get more efficient as an organization, deal with some things. But Jeff, I saw you on mic, so I'm assuming you were ready to jump in and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I would just support your comment, which is it's really across the enterprise. So you can't say it's in one area and it's not in other areas. And I think that part of our desire is to clean up the financial transparency. So the budgeting process is not strong. When you don't have strong budgets, it doesn't guide the spending and investment of an enterprise, and it doesn't hold people accountable. So I would say two overriding themes that we see everywhere so far in the university is, one, a lack of accountability. Second, a lot of inefficient processes. And third, just a lot of sloppiness. When there's not high level of fiscal accountability, inadvertently money gets spent that is not efficient. And we have that everywhere.
I'm going to get out the shepherd's crook here so we can move on to the ad hoc committee's report. Before we do that, a couple of people have asked if athletics has been involved in the cost reduction. So if you want to say yes or no to that question, and then we'll move to the ad hoc committee report, that would be appreciated.
Yep, absolutely they have. Again, nobody was immune, and they were impacted as well.
Okay, so let's turn things over to Jeannie Bukowski. She's presenting. Have you figured out how to get your screen to share?
No, I'll see if I can do this. Are you seeing my screen?
Yes, we are. Boy, congratulations.
Hallelujah. All right, well, we'll see if it moves. I may not be able to go full screen. We've already been talking about several items from the ad hoc, and I appreciate the time. So I won't spend a lot of time on this. I want to leave time for discussion. So I think, and a lot of people also have had the opportunity to review the documents as well. I think everybody's aware that they received some of the main documents from our committee's work that Matt sent out as an attachment to senators, and I believe other people have received this as well. And I assume, Matt, that they'll be made available.
Yes, they'll be part of the record.
So, you know, you have the opportunity to go back and look at this. So our charge, as you see there, is to try to identify alternative cost savings, revenue enhancements, and financial opportunities. The purpose of the constitution of the ad hoc by Senate exec was really to try to get a faculty voice into what was a very rapidly moving situation, and also to bring in expertise as represented on particularly relevant Senate standing committees, especially University Resources Committee, Strategic Planning Committee, admissions and retention. So that is what you see there in terms of the people who were brought together. And I just have to say what an honor and a pleasure it was to work with this group of colleagues across campus, across all 5 colleges, who really bring together not only just an amazing amount of expertise, and that of course is one of the things that we're recommending, is that we use more of our in-house expertise, incredible amount of expertise, but also just a deep appreciation of Bradley University and a deep commitment to the success of this institution. So it was just a really rather amazing group to be involved with. So I'm not going to dwell on any of these. These are the documents and other outputs that we worked on. So the white paper, of course, is the main deliverable, but we also did manage, as you see in those attachments, we did manage to get a statement to the Board of Trustees that was included in Ahmad's report. We were able to meet with President Stanford and Jeff Blade. We are happy to see that some of the things that have come out of the report, such as numbers 4 and 5 there, 5 and 6, the Lydia Moss Bradley Center for Transformational Education, those things are being worked on. The idea of higher education pricing working group, some of those things are moving forward very quickly in terms of opportunities. I think I already really voiced this, but the first time this response has come out, just given how quickly things are moving, we have argued that further cuts to the instructional core really run the risk of being damaging. And so we remain troubled by especially the involuntary separations. One of the reasons for that, or the main reason for that, is that in order to carry out our charge in terms of offering alternatives, is that we really, oops, I have something going on my screen that I have no idea what it is. Where did that come from? Is that a Zoom bomb? I don't know if you guys can see that little testing tablet thing there. I have no idea what that is. Somebody
you just
else
shared a different part of your computer screen.
I didn't share anything else. I think somebody else may be testing the tablet.
Tim or James, if you can figure out what's going on, let us know.
Yeah, because that was not me. We don't want to be Zoom bombed here in the middle of the Senate ad hoc committee report. So we tried to identify, again, it's not just a matter, we very much appreciate Steve's comment about culture, but it's not just about culture, it really is about market position also. So how do we make short-term decisions responding to the obvious difficulties we're in, that don't undercut the ability of Bradley to survive and thrive into the future? And so that really was one of our main guiding principles. And we also, of course, hit hard this idea of trust and accountability based on transparency in decision-making, based on clarity and communication at all levels, really from the Board of Trustees on down is what we would like to see. Those are the 4 sections of the white paper that I think people have had a chance to look at. So again, it was more of a holistic approach, right? We're not just going to start out with recommendations. We are going to explore how we got here. We want to look at what we're really good at. What do we want our future to look like? And then the recommendations would be an attempt to offer suggestions that would not undercut our ability, again, to thrive into the future. So here is some, and again, this is all in the white paper, so I'm not going to dwell on these numbers. But, and keep in mind, when we're talking about transparency, as Christy said, we've never seen numbers officially from, and this is in past administrations, from the CFO, from the controller's office, from the administration. So we, basically the URC, University Resources Committee, did a fantastic job of auditing financial statements, right? To try to pinpoint what some of these problems were. And as you can see from those numbers, we have gotten into a situation, a negative situation starting in 2016. Now, this is, I think, one of the more illustrative pieces of analysis we were able to put into the ad hoc committee report. And again, this is largely, many of you have seen something like this from the URC report as well. And again, this was actually put together by the URC report using Butler as a positive benchmark before President Standiford came to Bradley. So this was a coincidence in terms of this particular one. But I mean, if we're looking at areas that are problematic, tuition, of course, is one of these areas. And this was reported at the last Senate meeting, I believe, with the University Resources Committee report. Also, of course, and President Standiford mentioned this, contributions, right? Advancement does not compare favorably. Bradley's instructional spending is a lot lower than Butler's. Academic and student support spending is a lot lower than Butler's. So that's part of our contention in terms of the idea that instructional costs are not the primary problem. We might also note that Butler is very transparent in terms of the athletic budget. So again, we've talked about the RCM system, just transparency across the university. The basis for Bradley's excellence, one of the things that we've been really arrived at as a committee, just given what we see on campus, is that what Bradley does well, and it's not just words on a page, and it's not just, everybody says this, is we do well transformational learning experiential learning. We have a lot of evidence, and that was also contained in the student engagement document that was submitted that you can look at as well. So we really would like to see, and this is, giving faculty and members of the University Strategic Planning Committee more work. Strategic planning that really emphasizes transformational learning in addition to transparency and accountability. But the argument here, the second recommendation, is that for the strategic plan to really be implemented and work well, we have to have engagement between faculty and staff and the Board of Trustees as well, so that we get buy-in. So that, and we do recognize that there have been efforts in that regard in terms of, for example, Senate exec members attending board meetings, but we think there's a lot more room for that. So this section, instructional core and high quality student engagement, the basic argument here, in addition to classroom instruction being the profit center of universities, right? And this really is coming from people in the Foster College on the committee who regularly consult with organizations in terms of strategy, right? So they're applying some of their expertise to looking at our organization. This is where the caution comes in terms of further reduction of the institutional or the instructional core. And we looked at some IPEDS data. We're very concerned with an increasing student faculty ratio and really do worry that this will impede our ability to continue with high quality student engagement. And we are, again, very concerned that a lot of the immediate term decision making seems to be focused on looking at faculty operating margins, right? Through the involuntary separations and other things that we've already seen. Christy mentioned some of that as well. So what we have tried to do, and we are very pleased to see some of our ideas moving forward, is to try to provide suggestions for cuts in revenue generation that can enhance our market position rather than making it harder, for example, for us to engage in high quality student engagement. So and you can all look at the tables. Again, we had limited access to financial data, but we identified what we thought would be the savings already implemented from the extent we could tell. And then we identified further cost saving measures for the shorter term, and then some longer term strategic ideas. And again, some of these I believe are moving forward. This is another thing that we hit very hard. We were somewhat concerned about this idea of accessible excellence. Again, our strategy people, who do this for a living, looked at, what does accessible mean? If it means affordable, that means price. And I think we've done a pretty good job of demonstrating that it would be very difficult for us to compete on primarily the basis of price. And to put it crudely, we were talking about the idea of, Walmart or, blue collar U, and that really is not where we need to be going. We can compete on the basis of quality and quality student engagement. And we tossed around this idea of inclusive engagement that would be much more in keeping with our stated vision, with our goals, with our marketability, and with our commitment to diversity and inclusion and equity. Because we had a conversation, some of us on the committee were first gen. Some people on the committee were first gen. And so what we were talking about is when we say inclusive excellence, that kind of transformational education that we can offer is particularly important to the demographic that we may be looking at, right? So it's a matter of finding creative ways to make sure that those students, the first gen students, for example, succeed. And we can't do that if we're increasing student to faculty ratio and eliminating faculty positions, and for that matter, not having sufficient student support. So that's the general gist of that argument that we believe that we can be successful on. So again, our argument is, let's not make short-term cuts that may be detrimental to such a long-term vision. And we do have some specific ad hoc recommendations for Senate. We're not going to go through all of these. These are also outlined in those documents. A couple of things for the University Strategic Planning Committee. One of the things we did want to highlight here too is program prioritization. There was a very large amount of discontent in terms of faculty looking at the program prioritization process the way it shook down last year. There's a lot of discussion on that regarding or in Senate meetings. So one of the goals would be to develop an acceptable alternative, right? Or correcting some of the problems with the program prioritization model. Also University Resource Committee, curriculum regulations, and really also taking a hard look at tenure, promotion, dismissal in a way that would tie those things very firmly into our strategic goals. So again, in keeping with trying to be short, that is the ad hoc committee report. And I'm happy to try to answer questions, or if faculty on the basis of the ad hoc committee report would like to ask administration questions, I think that would be appropriate as well. And I will stop sharing my screen here if I can figure out how to do that. Stop share. All right.
I just have a comment. One of the topics in the white paper was the possible elimination of the graduate school. I'd just like to state that there, in that section, there was some inaccurate information as well as missing information. This is my 9th year at Bradley, and I find it very disappointing that no one contacted anyone in the graduate school or OISS, and we weren't consulted regarding this topic. I think we could have supplied a lot of input. And you know, whatever the decision you make is fine, but I think we should be a part of that process.
Keep in mind, Jeff, too, that this is just initial recommendations given other things that we certainly everyone has heard, the graduate school may be under consideration, may not. Again, an issue of transparency. I mean, I'm sorry if we also didn't engage in transparency. Brad, Anders, are you here? Because Brad was working primarily on that section. Would you like to add anything to that, Brad? I think Brad is here.
I am here, and this is one that has been discussed for probably 20 of the 27 years I've been at Bradley. Do all faculty feel this way? Probably not, but there are some that did, and so we included it in the report because of that. So it's just been something that has been discussed so many times that we felt that we had to continue to consider it, and that's why we included it.
And we did, I mean, we worked with Ahmad and other folks who had, apparently there have been reports on this in the past. And keep in mind too, given that this is something that's been discussed again and again, it's not necessarily a recommendation, it's a what if. If you were to look at the graduate school, what might happen with some of these, how could you transfer this over? And in terms of the OISSS, certainly in terms of the internationalization committee, we we considered not transferring that, but just what it is that that office does and how very important that office is. And so one of our recommendations that was set forward with the participation of the director of the OISSS was that that really needs the support for that office, regardless of what might happen to the graduate school. Support of that office absolutely needs to be maintained. So part of that statement there about the OISSS was directly from that other committee work. And we did have participation from the director of OISSS. But thank you.
And this is Jackie Hogan. I was also on the ad hoc committee. And just to clarify, the committee did not suggest eliminating graduate programs. We suggested that it might be wise to explore the possibility of devolving the structure of the graduate school, the graduate college, to the colleges involved. So just a suggestion that be reviewed.
If I may, this is Danielle Glassmeyer. I wanted to just pick up on or say a here to the ad hoc committee. Just in general, I thought it was very impressive work, and I want to thank you. I was part of the team that put together the committee, and I didn't have to serve on it, and I want to thank you all for doing all that hard work. The other thing that I'd like to pick up out of the report is just a smallish point, but the notion of inclusive excellence. I think that rather than short-term or rather than long-term, there's a short-term, perhaps even an emergent kind of issue for our students this fall. The digital divide is real.
Yeah.
And I had students all spring who made it through by the skin of their teeth, borrowing time, getting somebody to walk their little siblings around the street a couple of times, sharing bandwidth with a half a dozen people, that if there is, and there is, a very real possibility that our students will have a good portion of their education online. I guess I'm just praying, because I don't feel like I got no control over any of this. I'm praying that you guys are all doing everything that needs to happen to make sure that our students are well supported in terms of their needs, in terms of digital education. I also want to just make a plea to all the powers that be. Our students are now going to have to figure out which classes are on Sakai, which classes are on Canvas, which classes are online, which classes are hybrid, which classes are high flex. Are they in the classroom on Tuesday? Are they on the classroom on Thursday? It's going to be madness for our students.
It is.
Madness. And so before we enter this final month of preparation that we're all facing, which is already making me crazy, I'm just going to implore somebody to make a expletive deleted judgment call and say, let's simplify this. Let's make what our students are facing simpler, because inclusive excellence means, I believe, streamlining their access to this education in addition to other things that that might mean.
Zach Gorman, I think you have figured out a workaround so that Sakai and Canvas are accessible through the same portal. Is that true? You need to turn on your mic, Zach.
As soon as I figure out how to unmute things, right? So we're working on that. The intention here is that all students have essentially see their courses within Canvas. The courses that are located within Sakai would effectively be linked through Canvas. So we want the students to have as simple of an entry point as possible. We point them to one location, and for all intents and purposes, it appears to them that they are in one LMS. And so if they click on a link and it takes them to Sakai, then that would just naturally take them over there. We're working on that. That is our intention and our goal. Credit would need to go to Barb's team. They're the ones doing all of that major legwork. I'll also mention one other piece to it as well is, Daniel, we're very concerned about the experience on the student side, specifically for how students are going to consume all of this content, whether it be live streaming, Sakai content, this, that, and the other. So the university has invested in it. It's actually something that the president and Jeff and others have immediately started talking to us within, 2 weeks of you being here, on increasing our bandwidth capabilities for this fall. There's a lot of legwork that has gone on behind the scenes to make sure that those things are moving forward. And some major changes are going to be occurring in the next couple of weeks to meet those goals. And so that's in partnership also with Nathan's team and everything that they're doing to make sure that the residence halls and such are up to speed for what their needs are there too. So we are singularly focused on our students as best as possible we can be.
I'm resisting talking too much, and I'm at risk of doing that now, but Daniel, I agree with you. I have concerns about this too. How do we, it's a wicked complex problem, and the number of decisions and activities and things we need to do to be back face to face. It's, Jeff and I were talking about this earlier. It's a series of less or more optimal decisions, right? There is no good answer, but I hear you, and trying to do as much as we can to simplify. Jeff and I were comparing to what another university is doing, which I won't call out by name. Oh my goodness, is that a complex process what they've got that makes our process look wicked streamlined. It's just the nature of the beast. But we need to be diligent on this and not give up on trying to simplify as much as possible. I also just got to pause real quick, and I got to give a shout out to the university, the special advisory ad hoc committee. Still working on the terms myself, the white paper. A lot of really good stuff there. And I know Jeff and I, after our conversation with the group, we were totally energized by the conversation. I think I'm the one that might have introduced, trying to get my head around who we are and our strengths. I think I'm the one that came up with accessible excellence, trying to consolidate different things down. And the group did a very nice job of pushing back and saying wrong answer, and came up with inclusive excellence, which I love. I think it's absolutely, and it, as soon as I heard, I'm like, yeah, that's it. That's what we should be talking about. That's what resonates. And so just a lot of really good work. And I think there's a lot to be done with the white paper moving forward too, to start working on pieces that are presented there. So I just, a shout out to the group. I don't know how you all found time to do all the research and put all that together, because I know we got you doing a lot of other stuff too, but I thought it was really well done.
Could I bring in, there are a couple of questions I'm seeing on the chat, and I think, Paul Wavon, are you with us? I think he was from Nova Scotia. So yeah, we've been treated to views of the Atlantic Ocean from Paul's cottage in Nova Scotia when we've been working, which have made it somewhat more easy to actually work, is to see things like that. But we have two questions that I think are relevant and that perhaps Paul could look at. If Paul is here, he could delve into this a little bit. There's one question: what role is Bradley Athletics playing in helping us to be more financially disciplined? The faculty are under the impression that the academic core is absorbing the majority of these cuts. Can you offer evidence that other units are also being asked to run lean operations? I think that that's more for the president and CFO, but then related here, a question, let's see. Can the amount under athletics in the ad hoc committee's financial structure analysis on the white paper be explained? And can anyone say whether some number is going to be revealed at some point? So Paul, do you want, if he's here, has anybody seen him? Okay, he's, again, where Paul is obtaining the data is from doing the audits of the financial statements. As far as I know, under past administrations, unlike at Butler, there's never been just a revealed amount on athletic spending. As far as I know, there at Bradley, you know, we've asked for that information. University Resources Committee has asked for that information. That information has never been forthcoming, which is part of the reason for our call for transparency and accountability across all units. But perhaps Steve or Jeff could weigh in on this question in the chat regarding you know, whether some number is going to be revealed at some point.
Jeff and I've talked about this multiple times, and I can't fathom why we wouldn't share that data. Our plan is to, I mean, again, finances are messy right now. So it's been tough to get clean data on things. And one of the things I don't want to do is share data I don't feel confident in. So part of the reason we're not sharing this stuff already is I want to get to the point where we feel confident in the data. I worry that sometimes numbers have been shared, projections have been given that weren't as clean as they needed to be. And I want to make that mistake. We want to clean that up, but our intent absolutely is to share that. So I'm getting familiar. I don't totally get the number yet, but I am getting familiar with our numbers on athletic relative to the peers. You may or may not be surprised to know that we are way below almost all of our peers in terms of how much we spend in athletics. We're way below. So it's, I think, contrary to popular perception, they're not rolling in bags of money over there and the rest of the university is suffering. They're being underfunded just like everybody else, if I can be so bold in saying that. So that's, I don't think you're going to get overly surprised by that. Well, maybe I think it's consistent with perhaps what you would expect, but I can't imagine why I'm looking at Jeff's box. I can't imagine why we wouldn't share this data once we have it. And we just need to get it cleaned up and feel confident in the data before we share it.
And I would just offer too that as we've gone through the budget exercise, because to Steve's comment earlier, we've sat down with every single leader of every single function, academic unit, et cetera, in the university athletics. And I would say that every single conversation with what each of those individuals are asked to do, every single one of them had issues with their budget, what they're being asked to do with what they're provided. So it's not like we got to athletics and they were all happy with their budget and might be an indication that they're overfunded. Wasn't the case with the administrative functions. It wasn't the case with the academics. So I think you can all rest assured that the entire university, regardless of the function, section, unit, et cetera, is in exactly the same place.
Hi, this is Megan Remmel from Political Science. And I wanted to ask about the termination since we don't have much time left. I know 6 of the names of people who have been terminated, and of them, 4 of them are women and 2 of them are men. And of the 4 women, 3 of them were in tenure track positions and neither of the men were. And I am concerned, given the gender equity report from a year or 2 ago and the acknowledgement from Bradley that we have a pipeline issue in terms of getting women to full professor, how that was or was not included in the thought process of who was terminated or whose contracts were not renewed, whatever language you want to use. Because obviously we're going to have problems fulfilling full professor positions with women if we are eliminating them as assistants.
Walter, I noticed your video is not on, but I know this is something you and I talked about a bit. Do you want to chime in here? Or do you want me to talk about a little bit?
You want to start and then I'll jump in.
Yeah, so it is something we paid attention to. We obviously focused on one of the things that I think the ad hoc committee did a very nice job of is talking about the importance of not undermining our ability to deliver excellent education, right? So we actually, as we were thinking about what positions we were looking at, we were very thoughtful about making sure that we kept the coverage where we needed to keep it, right? So that those areas that were in high demand and had capacity constraints, we were very thoughtful about not going after those. And then we did look at the gender equity issues and different issues. We looked at the positions and we're thoughtful about that. And there is a spread in that group, as you've seen, of both men and women. But the first strike was on the areas where we thought we had capacity opportunities, and that drove. And then we did look at the other issue as well. Walter, am I capturing that even closely to accurate? How you would?
Yes, that's exactly right. When I'd add one other thing. When we started this process, the deans were insistent. They were worried about names getting out as they were looking at kind of initial looks way back in the spring when we asked them to make recommendations about positions, and they were concerned about names being leaked out at a very preliminary level. And so these were submitted by essentially position numbers so that we weren't looking at names. Now, as we went through it, we were going through positions and things like that. I wasn't thinking in terms of this initially, and as we started to look at it, we started to realize that there was a gender difference in terms of this, and went back, took another hard look, made some changes. But yes, at the end of the day, there was a gap there.
This will be, I don't know if this helps in the current situation or not, but this is an issue that I worry about, by the way. So two of the things, as I looked at Bradley from afar, obviously before I arrived, looked at it afar, 2 things that really caught my attention in a positive way is the number of first generation students. I'm one of them, by the way, so I fall into that category. I'm a first gen college student myself. And the diversity of our student population. We outperform our peers significantly, both in the number of the percentage of first generation and traditionally underrepresented groups. I then looked at the faculty, and we are not any better than our peers in that space. And that's an opportunity for us moving forward. And that's something that with the group that we put together to talk about diversity and inclusion issues, that's something I want to make a priority moving forward as well. So it is something that is very much on my radar screen. I think we need to be thoughtful about making sure. And by the way, the feedback I've gotten from our students too, by the way, I think I saw Emma on here earlier, our student body president, and I've met with the Black Student Alliance and a couple other different groups. And it's not just our faculty. One I got really pushed back on is in our counseling center, that we don't have any minorities in our underrepresented groups in the traditionally underrepresented groups in the counseling center. And so I want to be thoughtful about that as we move forward. I know that's not a great answer to our current situation, but I will say, please know it's a priority and it's something that I'm very sensitive to and have paid attention to. And it's something as we continue to grow the organization in different ways and transform, that's something that is going to be a high priority in terms of thinking about how we create a more inclusive, excellent environment. And that's a key piece of the inclusivity.
So what was the process used to eliminate these 12 positions? What were the steps that were followed to end up with these 12 positions?
Steve, you want me to talk about that?
Yeah, if you don't mind. That was, you were more in front of that than anything else.
So as I indicated back in the spring, when we were looking at a much deeper deficit, I asked the deans to come up with plans for budget reductions. Those plans were collected and we kept those. As we moved closer to the decisions that we need to make, and we had a sense of where we were, I started going through all of those, comparing it to some extent, looking at where we had VSA impact on the faculty, where we didn't. One of the things about voluntary kinds of severance agreements is that they are seldomly strategic. And in this case, they were not. We had programs that are very high demand that were deeply hit by this process. And so as a result, we were looking at programs that were either largely unhit or unhit by the voluntary severance approach, and two, looking at programs that were lower in terms of the program prioritization process that we had gone through earlier in the year. Based on that, I looked at what the deans provided. Understand, I had asked the deans, and initially we were worried because of what we were concerned about, the size of the potential budget hole. I had asked the deans to look at potential cuts that were irrespective of tenure. They included full professor positions, associate professor positions, assistant professor, and non-tenure track positions were all included in there. We looked through those. We initially were looking at what we could do in those areas with non-tenure track positions. When we weren't able to find enough, we went to the tenure track positions in order to complete that. And that's how we did it. I went then, talked with the deans again, had as many as 2 or 3 follow-up conversations with the deans as a result of those as a result of the kinds of things I was doing. I did not want, and I made a commitment to the deans, that I would not eliminate positions without a very serious conversation with them. Had those conversations. The deans understand, would argue and want to keep every possible position that they could. This was not them saying, oh no, this is an extra position, we don't need this person. That was implicit and understood in all of this. But as I said, when we get the VSAs, we're in a position where we're not operating strategically, and some programs that are very high demand at the university enroll a lot of students. We're pretty heavily hit through the VSA program, and so we couldn't go to those programs as places to look for cuts.
Hi, this is Naomi Stover from biology. We lost our lab coordinator in this, Tim Stoffer. He told me I could tell everyone that. We have one of the highest SCH on campus. Is that what was being looked at, or what are other factors?
So we were also looking, so I was providing examples of faculty cuts. We also looked at a number of staff cuts as well. And with the staff cuts, we were looking at frankly, a different kind of calculus. And we were looking at where we could make reductions, maybe with less impact. We weren't necessarily looking at the program prioritization data. Obviously, biology scores very high there. But honestly, part of what I was trying to do was minimize or reduce the effect on defined faculty positions. I realize that there are many instances where staff members are also doing teaching, but I was, as a result of this, an important part of what I was trying to do was reduce the impact on faculty positions.
Walter, this is Danielle. I'm hoping that you or somebody would be able to point out the handbook language that was governing the process of elimination of our Bradley family.
Sure. The language that I was working for, I anticipated this question, is under, so I'm looking at the December 5th version of the December 5th, 2018 version of the handbook. Under termination of employment, I'm looking at page 105, non-reappointment of non-tenured faculty.
This is Ahmad. I have a question related to this. The ad hoc committee has identified a large amount of savings that are not necessarily related to terminating positions. Would there be an effort to seriously look at what it is that the committee has recommended? Fortunately, we have a year before these firings take effect. In the coming year, would there be a serious effort to look into what it is that the ad hoc committee has recommended? And that was part of the reason that we formed the ad hoc committee, to provide a different narrative to the prevailing narrative at Bradley from a perspective of mostly faculty, so that we can take a step back and look at other ways by which perhaps we can put our house in financial order. Or is this going to be another report that, okay, thank you, we'll give it due consideration and nothing is going to happen?
No, I'll jump in front of this and then Jeff chime in if it makes sense. But absolutely. So two things. First of all, because the finances are messy, right? So this is not any comment on the ad hoc committee. I think they did a really good job putting this together. Some of the estimates, I don't think we can get the savings that are suggested in some of the areas as much as they think we can. And again, I put that on the fact that you don't have clean data to work with, so you have to make some assumptions. So no, I think they did the best they could with the data they had. But as we get into it, I don't think the savings are as significant, but absolutely we will be looking at that. In fact, I'll reinforce the fact that we're counting on them being, some of those savings being accurate, because recall, we're still going to have, as Jeff reported in finance, we're still looking at a continued structural deficit if we do nothing else than what we've already done. We're counting on the fact that some of those savings are there. We'll capture some of that. We'll also generate some new revenue. We'll also do some more on the advancement front. But yeah, I think Jeff feels the same way. We're counting on the fact that, I don't want to overstate. I don't think I can overstate. I think there's a lot of really good work in the report. And I'm not sure that all of it will play out exactly the way the report's suggesting, but it's a great place to start and to dive in and find some opportunities to do some significant savings. And literally some of the things you've been talking about, I mean, if I showed you the copy, I have like, yes, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point, because they're like, yeah, we could totally do that. That makes a lot of sense. So our intent absolutely is to take the report and use it as a tool. Now, to Jeff's credit and his team, what I really get excited about is Jeff and the finance team have seen some of the same things. And when you see it from over here and the ad hoc committee are both pointing to the same thing, I'm a researcher in heart, I usually like triangulated data, but with given those two groups, if they're both pointing in the same direction, that's something we absolutely have to look at. So that's a strong, unequivocal yes. I don't think the numbers are going to be quite as grand or strong as I think the committee had hoped they would be in some cases. But if it's half of what they've suggested, it's still worth doing, right? So that's something that as we look at the report, I think there's a lot of opportunities there.
Thank you.
And I'll, with the risk of getting myself in trouble, and you can hold us to that. So I there's stuff in there that I read, some of the stuff we read, and I'm like, man, that just absolutely makes sense. And I'm counting on the fact that we're able to follow up on some of the things that are in the report. I think there's a lot of great work to be done there. And not all of it will work or make sense. And we'll learn more as we dig into it, but a lot of it will.
Hey, this is Danielle again. I'm sorry to be a real pain here. I'm just still a little confused about the language that was governing this decision from the handbook. I looked at Walter's reference to page 105, and that talks about the non-tenured faculty's rights to appeal. There's 3 conditions in the handbook that justify eliminating faculty. Which one of those 3, probationary faculty included, which one of those 3 was the governing principle?
Handbook is not my area of expertise, so I'm going to be a little soft in the response here. So I'm going to see if Walter gets a chance to chime in here. And I noticed the screen's gone blank.
President Standiford, I appreciate your candor about that, but I do encourage you to read it. I think it's a good document.
So the irony is I actually did read it. There's a copy in my office. Only I found out that after I read it, it wasn't the updated copy. So the language had changed. So I need to get the updated copy. I don't know why I have an old copy in my office. It's literally sitting right here as I reach up. And I read it and I shared that with Walter. He's like, yeah, that's not an updated copy. So
I'd be happy to share. There's 3 conditions. One is for cause. One is for financial exigency, as one is when the position is being eliminated because of an elimination of a program.
Walter, I see you looking at the handbook.
Yeah, I'm looking at the handbook. Danielle, I'm going to have to, I will respond to this. I'm not prepared to respond to it at this point.
I appreciate it, Walter. And I feel that in our past relationship, you've always been extremely upfront and candid with me. And it's not my intention to put you on the spot, but there are people who are feeling very injured.
And again, one thing I say this with some trepidation, and I get that, right? I mean, these are really, really tough decisions, and we're even with what we did, we're still carrying a significant deficit moving forward. So we tried to do it in as humane a way as we could. We tried to do it with as few reductions as we could justify. I know that's little solace to those that are impacted by this. I get that. But I do, it's the reality of our budget situation is such that we've tried to do it in a way that we think makes the most sense given our circumstances.
Tim Kelso, did you want to say something?
Yes, just real briefly. I'm curious to know, once you are able to wrap your hands and I guess your mind around the finances of the institution, I'd be curious if you can figure out why so many bad decisions were made and how moving forward we can have a better, more wholesome, useful decision-making process at Bradley. And I think part of this has to do with how the board is constructed, how the board operates, and then how the board communicates. But also, you keep talking about accountability, but the fact is that everybody that's currently in Swords Hall might well be gone in 5 years, and we are the ones that live with the consequences of the decisions that get made. And so I'd really like to see some work done to improve the decision-making processes so that we really can put this behind us. Secondly, I'd really like clarity on how you would like the ad hoc committee to be moving forward. Thank you.
So I'm in fierce agreement with you, Tim, that one of the things that, so I'm always a little I think learning from the past is important, but I want to be careful not looking backwards too much, right? That's the balancing act. And I think a big part of it is the finances are just messy. And one of the things I'm a big fan of, this is perhaps a vestige of my academic background. I was an organizational theorist, and I'm a big put systems into place that sustain. And one of the things that Jeff and his team are doing is putting a strong financial system into place. One of the challenges that we've run into is a lot of the financial knowledge would exist in individuals' heads. And two problems with that. One, if that person leaves, you lose it. And another problem is it's really tough to get transparency into somebody else's head. And so one of the things we're being very aggressive about is systematizing the data and the information so that it transcends individuals and that it's not based on an individual walking in or out of the room. And that's a lot of things we're working on, a lot of things we're going to clean up. I honestly think that would be one of the best that we could do, that we could leave as a legacy, quite frankly, to the institution, is to get good, clean, systematized data. And I'm a big fan of database decision-making, and that's really tough to do when you don't have good data. And everybody can be partners in that process when we're all working from the same data. And it gets really difficult to do if you don't do that. On the question of how to continue to work with the committee, great question. And I don't have a good answer to that because I'm still learning our processes here. So I think I'd personally like to meet with that group again, and then maybe we can talk about what the next steps are to continue to move forward. We had the emergency advisory planning committee that we had put together that was supposed to sunset at the end of the month. They've actually agreed to continue to meet with me on a bi-weekly basis. I really valued the input they had given, and they've agreed to continue to do that. Everybody's stretched to the limit right now, right? So I don't want to suggest extra work for people that are prepared to not have to carry that burden anymore. But if the ad hoc committee wants to talk about a structure of how to move forward with some of this, maybe it's not the whole committee, maybe it's a subgroup of the committee. Let's talk about that. I don't have a good answer to that right now, but that's something I'd definitely be interested in continuing the conversation as to what that looks like.
I can give a little bit. Senate exec talked about this yesterday, Tim, and our meeting was at noon, and I haven't had time to construct an email to Jeannie saying what our plans are for you guys, at least for the rest of the summer.
So you've already got that working. That's good. I'm glad to hear that that's already.
So we had, but I haven't got the information to the committee yet. We are after 5 o'clock. And based on the history of this body, typically people start voting with their feet at about 5 o'clock. Sometimes their feet stay in the room until 5:15. I'm quite willing to hang out here till 5:15 or so. If folks have a few more questions.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Fred.
This is Fred Tayari. I'm a senator. IMET department has lost 3 faculty members during this past academic year without any replacement. Is that called faculty reduction or cost control? And we have only 2 faculty members to teach the above 100 students and many courses. And these 2 do not have expertise to teach all courses. That's definitely 2 regular faculty members in industrial engineering and 1 chairman who teaches only 1 course. And then has anybody looked at the consequence of the unhappy customers to damage that we get beyond this academic year? That's my question, and I am really uncomfortable with the situation that we are facing. It's not just financial, and we look at the situation and on cost basis. With only 5.5 students, we get break even for every classes. With that is the numbers with the income versus the salary that pay compensation for faculty teaching the courses. And that's absolutely, I'm looking into crippling this program. Industrial engineering will be goodbye. And that being a high enrollment with respect to the size of faculty and with the the ratio of the students to faculty. I'm not talking about the entire department. I'm talking about the real vital program. And I appreciate any. I'm not asking for a response now. I'm looking at intensive and careful reviewing the program, looking at the work structure breakdown, looking at the value added costs and with the compensation paid, what value Bradley gets out of that in terms of revenue. This is not done. And I'm not expecting, as the president is not knowledgeable in all programs, our dean is not knowledgeable in our individual program. And the chairman probably will not be good in all understanding all detail of the courses. So this need a task force to completely review those details and come up with some resolution for substitution, for perhaps eliminating our program. It is fine. Okay, that's what I want to say. Thank you.
Can I jump in on this real quick? So Fred, I appreciate your response. And again, one of the things that that I want to reiterate is something I said earlier. Departures are not strategic in how they happen, but we're also not in a position at this moment where we can replace everybody who leaves. And there are a lot of places around campus where we have open positions. I know you're in this position, but if you ask a lot of your colleagues around campus and even in your own college, you're going to find that you have a lot of company at this particular moment. I met with the president this morning requesting some additional positions. We have an ongoing process that we're working on around filling requests for positions. And again, we have to be careful, as I said earlier, we don't find ourselves in the same position that we are in terms of this. But this goes, actually, what you're saying goes to the heart of the issue that we've been facing this year. That is, it may be that we have, it may be that we need the same number of faculty that we have right now, but we don't necessarily have them all in exactly the right place. And I can't necessarily, I can't take, my background is in communication. I can't go over and teach an art course or a philosophy course. I don't have that background. I certainly can't teach in engineering. We simply can't move the pieces around. So part of what we're trying to do is make sure that that we're in a position to hire faculty in the areas that we need to.
Just one more point. Personally, I am willing to teach 5 courses per semester if I know how, not just, to go to the classroom and talk. That is not right. So that's what my point is. That's I'm not, saying I'm looking for load reduction. Really, the expertise that needed must be there. That's to make our customers happy. Thank you. Thank you for your response.
Thank you, Fred.
This is Bill Bailey. 2 questions from colleagues very briefly. Will academic program prioritization resume in 2021? And when will we hear the fiscal year 2020 results?
I'm sorry, I missed the last part.
I'm sorry, do we have the 2020 fiscal year 2020 results?
You mean for the finances, Bill?
Yes.
I can answer that one quickly in the interest of time. So we're just closing fiscal 2020, which ended at the end of May. They're making final entries. Audit starts in I think it's a week or 2 weeks. So by mid-August, we'll have the financials.
Program prioritization in 2021.
The president and I have not talked about that. I anticipate that there will be some version of program prioritization. What we were working on as a committee when the virus hit was reforming, fixing, changing some aspects of program prioritization. But as I said, the president and I haven't really talked about what the future with program prioritization is, and so I can't give you a complete answer on that at this point.
Walter, there's a couple of questions in the chat about return to campus. You might just want to refer them to your email that got sent out a little while ago, but maybe you could say make a few remarks about it.
So that's not my email. There was an email that went out a little while ago that's directed at faculty and staff that talk about trying to add some level of flexibility around return to campus. One of the things that's included in there is that in conversation with the dean and the department chair, we would allow faculty who are approved or are able to come back for full-time teaching to request having one of their courses be taught online. We're just trying to add some flexibility. We know that there are some challenges, especially with the four course load. I actually plan to send an email out today, but based on some feedback, I'm making some revisions for clarity to the email, and it may go out tomorrow, it may go out Monday, with a little bit more information about return to work in terms of class functions. I will tell you that with so if you're approved to have a course that you can teach online, our expectation would be the other courses that you teach would all be face-to-face. Now, again, there's an underlying assumption that if you have issues affected by ADA, that you can apply through human resources to get a waiver on teaching face-to-face at all. But one of the things that we understand is very important to our students is that we give them as much of a face-to-face experience as we can. But that's going to be complicated. You heard Danielle earlier talking about her concerns about the complexity that students are going to have with their classroom experience. Are they going to be in class on Monday, or are they going to be in class on Wednesday? It's our understanding that a fair number of classes, at least in theory, could meet face-to-face all of the time. That's my hope. But I also understand there will be a lot of classes where, because of social distancing, students cannot all sit in the classroom at the same time. And we're going to have to figure out some alternative strategies. We have some resources available for you to help you on that, and that will come out in my email. By the way, I also want to mention very quickly, my email will also include information about stop the clock options for faculty who are on the tenure track, so that they can stop the clock. Essentially, the way we're doing it is everybody is opted into this, and then you can simply opt out by submitting your tenure materials at the regular time or on a 1 year or 2 year delay. but that information will be in my message. I just wanted to reinforce that we didn't forget because of the current situation that you have extraordinary levels of work, and we want to recognize and acknowledge that.
So I'm seeing a million questions popping up about the back to work, and I don't think there's any way, even if we went way into the hours, that we could answer all of them. Thank you, Walter. That was a good description on the issue on the back to work. But I'll add a little bit. Well, first, never in my career, and I'm guessing this is true for many of us, have I ever come across a situation or a time as complex as what we're dealing with right now. I would describe it as a series of decisions with potential bad outcomes. I mean, it's just, no path is optimal, right? So we're making the best decisions we can versus the data we have today. So two things I'll mention that are driving principles for us. First, the health and well-being, faculty, staff, students, top priority. And you could have a big debate on whether that's best served by having people come back to campus or not. We've made a commitment to back in campus, but we're going to follow the science and be measured and balanced in how we do it, and do it in safe, responsible ways. We committed some time ago to not be mask optional. That was a decision we made a while ago. As soon as the science started coming out saying masks mattered, we went on record to say, okay, masks matter. And I think at one point there was a conversation around if you could do social distancing in the classroom, maybe it makes sense. Christy, I see you're still on. You gave great feedback on that, and I think made a very compelling argument on how that's just not a good answer. So we went masks are required, boom. Tim, you've asked about testing. We've actually gone through a fairly rigorous process of thinking about what we're going to do. It's called surveillance testing. That's what the science tells us makes the most sense right now, where I think we came up with a number of 275. Go back and check that number. Our math department actually helped us come up with this number, how many students, faculty, and staff we'd have to sample on a weekly basis to quickly catch any emergence of the virus on campus. So we'll do what's called surveillance monitoring. We're about to strike a deal with a firm to help us on tracing, so that if in fact there is something that comes up, we'll have a mechanism in place to quickly trace, contact tracing, so that we can quickly deal with that. We have places identified in student housing where students can be put into isolation if something pops up. So we've shared our plan with the County Board of Health. They're pretty excited about what we're doing. It's consistent with what the Illinois Board of Higher Education has suggested. It's consistent with CDC guidelines, and it's all based on what we know today. And the other thing I'm comfortable doing, I'm going to really push, if the science tells us something very different tomorrow, we will pivot to do what makes the most sense to protect the health and well-being of our students, faculty, and staff. And that's both, I think, critical and maddening at the same time, because, and this is, I don't know about for you all, but one of the most maddening things about this process for me is the ongoing uncertainty and the continued changes. I think everybody was excited to get out of, in phase 4 of in the state, and yet now we're having to watch closely to make sure we can stay in stage 4. And the state's now come out with some very different guidelines for us to follow as well. So we'll continue to watch it. We'll be balanced and measured in our approach. We're going to follow the science. I'll be like Tim's. We're going to follow this. I'm hopefully not be controversial on this. We're going to follow the science, not the politics of this. So when science says things like masks matter, we'll wear masks, and we'll be very clear on that. And so that's something we're going to be aggressive about. And one of the things we're working on right now is a whole marketing campaign around being clear on what's expected of our students, faculty, and staff. You haven't seen it yet because it's in process, but to be clear on what those expectations are and to be aggressive in making sure that people follow those expectations. And that's going to be a key part of our coming back to campus plan. And if we get to a point where we need to pivot based on new information or new data, we'll do that as well. And one of the things we'll try to do is to be constantly communicating that information so people are aware of those decisions as we're making them. Tim, I see you nodding a lot. I know you've thought long and hard and been very involved in some of these things. So I know you were the one that asked a question about the testing specifically, so I don't know if I answered that for you or not. But
I just wanted to point out, I'm not a senator, so I'm sorry to speak, but we have not, to my knowledge, gotten any information about what the plan is. And so as far as faculty know, there is no plan. And so I would encourage you to be able to communicate something, even acknowledging that it's preliminary or it's dynamic. I've been asking for weeks what happens when a student in my class tests positive, and I have yet to have any answer that makes any sense to me on that front. And so given how much we're being asked to do in this environment, sharing this information as you have it would be wholesome. So.
And this is Megan Rummel again from Political Science. I'm very concerned about the prospect of a student who refuses to wear a mask in my class. And I have been told from administration or from higher ups in my college that I am going to somehow not be the enforcer, but I'm also not supposed to call BUPD. And I, as a younger female faculty member, am 100% expecting a most likely male student to challenge my authority. And I'm not entirely sure how I'm supposed to handle this situation.
So it is not mask optional. So we'll let us work through that. That's a great question, a great concern. And one of the things I think is going to be pretty important is for us to very quickly enforce that early on in the semester to set the tone that that's not. Now, police chief has been very clear with me. He doesn't want to necessarily be the mask monitor. So we'll find a way to do that and make sure that that happens. But so that's a question that we haven't sorted out yet, but it's one we know is out there and we will get it sorted out. Tim, to your point, I actually appreciate the feedback around there is no plan, because we have put out pieces of a plan and talked about things. I question whether our communication methods are working, because you're not the first person to suggest there's no plan. And that suggests that we're not communicating well with what we're planning. And so that's something, that's why I want to get into a marketing campaign so that we can do a better job of communicating those expectations and quickly communicate when they change, right? So if we get new data, the science on this changes by the day. I actually saw some, I don't know if you also, I saw some very encouraging news about vaccine trials and such. So you don't always see that. So it's not going to happen this semester though. So we know that. Maybe for the spring, we'll kind of see how that evolves, but the science changes by the day. And so one of the things we'll have to think about is how to pivot as well. But that feedback that you don't feel like you know what's going on is good, because that's a miss on our part, because there is some planning in place and we feel like we're communicating it, but it's obviously not getting out. So I'll have to think about what's the best way to make sure people get that information. Yeah. What is the best way for you to get that information? Is it email? Is it a website? Is it, if you said, I want to know it all and I want to know it now, what would be the best way for us to communicate that to you?
Not videos.
This is Bill Bailey. One thought I have on that is when we have college meetings that people are attending, there's an opportunity for discussion and deans can walk through issues. Emails, especially if they're long, individuals may start to skim and miss things. So there's a thought on that.
I think there's a disconnect between what you're communicating to students and what's being communicated to those of us that are on campus. Yeah. And so your surveillance testing plan has been, that's been shared with students, but not with us. And so I want to know, do I need to go into quarantine? Is there going to be some place, am I going to stand in line and get a test? Am I going to have to wait a week to get the results of that test? What's going to happen when somebody is positive in my class?
Tim, I really value this feedback, because I'm actually pretty proud of what we've come up with on our surveillance planning. I mean, our surveillance testing planning. It's actually, we've gotten some really good feedback from others like the County Board of Health and others that are in this space and looking at it, wow, we really like your plan. But if nobody knows about it, it doesn't have any impact, right? So that's good. And the long, I suspect we've done it too much in long emails to the extent that we have communicated it, which is probably not optimal. So, okay. I actually like the idea of department meetings. That really is.
Also getting emails from all sorts of different offices. Yes. So it's not coming from one place and it's hard to keep track of all of the information that's coming. And I know that there's this website, but I am much more attuned to my email, but then I get all these emails and I'm not sure what direction things are coming from.
Can I add something to that? This is Jackie Henderson.
Please.
Being in various meetings, you hear it. So I don't necessarily say, hey, I didn't see it in the email. I do agree that the emails are kind of long and they do get, after a while, you just get tired of reading them and you might miss something. Even if there was a website that you had where you could direct us to and say, hey, there's an update on our COVID planning or something real short. I think people would hit that if it was a title. I don't know if people agree with that or not, but if I just got something in there and it'd say, hey, update on our return to campus for faculty. So we would know, hey, let's click this and go back and see what the update is. I think that would be helpful, and just keep everything running. Like, as of this day, these are the things that are going on. I think that would be more helpful than, like, I know you think you're probably telling everybody. I've heard a lot of this stuff, but if you're not in any of the meetings that are with you or on those other sites, you all may not have a clue.
This is really helpful feedback. I thank you. And I get it. I get a long email. What I end up doing, and for those of you that mentioned that, the long emails, I'm like, wow, that's a long one. It'll take me a while. I'll get back to it later. And half the time that doesn't happen, right? So we've all been there. I do that myself with some regularity. I like the idea, to the extent that we do emails, keep them short, direct you to the website. I like that a lot. That's another nice, clean thing to do. And then get into some of these other department meetings. I like that idea as well. We'll have to think about how we, and you all are, it sounds like you're having active department meetings over the summer. It sounds like everybody's having these meetings and are busy, which doesn't normally happen over the summer. Daniel, I see you shaking your head no. So apparently you're not having the meetings, but it's but maybe that's where
it's very hit or miss.
Okay. So maybe the combination of shorter emails direct into the website, get to the meetings where they're happening and when we can, would be a better way of doing this. Okay.
I had a good suggestion from somebody coming and actually texted me that it might be good to, in addition to these other things, have a FAQ page that is updated frequently in terms of questions that people have. I think that would be good.
Yeah.
A good place, this is Burl George, a good place to start, you may want to go to the OSHA webpage, www.osha.gov, and they have some basic suggestions on how to interact with employees. Consider yourself, say, an employer. They have situations with regard to how you're supposed to interact with employees, which would be very helpful, Ms. Bukowski, in figuring out what you need to do in your class.
Yeah, that's good.
It is 5:30. James, is it possible to capture the chat and send that to President Standiford and CFO Blade and Walter?
If you can tell me who all you'd like to have it, yes, I can go ahead and just make a text file out of it.
Okay, yeah, I think we'd like to do that. I think President Standiford would be a good person to send it to.
Love to see it.
Walt, the provost, for sure. Jeff, would you like a copy? And probably send one to me and I can share it with Senate Exec. And it is 5:31. I'm getting hungry. I don't know about the rest of you.
Yeah. I'm getting text from my wife about dinner myself, so I probably need to at least text her back.
So I do want to thank everybody for coming. At the peak, we had almost 100 participants in Zoom, and I know there were some more folks out on the live feed. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. The feedback's been really helpful.